What's going on, Mike?
Hey, Nick, how are you, man? Good
Thanks
to
for
see you.
agreeing to meet me, man.
Pleasure. Welcome to Philly.
Absolutely. And here are the cheesesteaks
That
as
apple
promised.
Whiz wit as promised.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So I've been wondering the entire drive here, how is this NFL schedule made? You're the guy to talk to about that. So I'm hoping we can bribe you with these cheesesteaks and
I'm an easy mark, man. You want to go sit down and get into them and start talking about it?
let's do it, man.
You got
So, might be some people watching our show that don't actually know who you are. So before we get into the nitty gritty here, what do you do for the NFL?
Yeah, lucky enough to be entering my 31st season with the league. I started in the internet group 100 years ago before people had email addresses, before companies had websites. So a little bit of missionary marketing, trying to explain to people what the world might look like someday. Got this weird rep around the building as the computer nerd.
Oh, man.
And when the broadcasting department was looking to automate the scheduling process, they needed a computer nerd. So right time, right place. And yeah, switched into the broadcasting group 1997 and been there ever since.
All right. So you're obviously the man to talk to about the NFL schedule. You've been there since the beginning, pretty much.
Feels
So
like it.
you started in the 90s. When you guys were initially making the schedules back then, what did that process look like?
Yeah, very different than it looks like today. The whole process really was done by hand. It was a manual process where we would literally take each of the, at that point, 256 games, and we'd hang them up on a board with pegs. It was like little tags, and we'd hang them up one at a time. And every decision that you made felt like the right decision in the moment, but we had no way of knowing what corners we were painting ourselves into, what roads we were closing off to ourselves. And so we get a schedule done, but we knew it wasn't as good as it could be. We knew it wasn't necessarily optimal. And the meetings with, then Commissioner Tagliabue and now Commissioner Goodell was so much less about, hey, here's everything that's great about the schedule, like those meetings are today.
Yeah.
But they were much more like, hey, here's everything that's wrong. And here's all the phone calls you're going to get from angry owners and angry coaches and general managers. So even back then, we knew someday the process could be a lot more efficient. We could be a lot better about doling out these games.
Gotcha. And to kind of give the audience a bit of perspective here, how long did that process take? So I know you guys start when the Super Bowl ends.
Yeah, it was a full, 14 weeks just to get one schedule done. We would literally start with a blank board, and we would start with, maybe a key Thanksgiving game or two, or a big, Sunday night football game in October, whatever it was. We'd hang up a couple of tags, but really we'd start at the top and we'd just build week one. And if we got through week one, we'd build week two, and each week would take us a couple of days.
Then you realize the Eagles are playing 8
Wait
games in a row.
can't do that. Let's back up the food chain again and start over. And somewhere where you went left, now you've got to go right. And you're trying to remember all the reasons you made the decisions that you made that got you into this place in the first place, so that you don't go over that well-worn ground and leads you down a path where you don't want to be.
Gotcha. And AWS comes on as a partner, and it sounds like this process was ripe for improving. So
Talk about, right place, right time. It really was. Instead of using those 14 weeks to build one schedule by hand, when we first made AWS, it was really a hardware play for us. It was, we could take the manual process and we could trust it to a computer. And the first year we had one computer, and then we had 3 computers. And then I remember vividly the year we had 10 computers. Thought we were landing the space shuttle, man. I had all the hardware firepower I thought we'd ever need.
And perfect. And you mentioned, you wanted to keep the parts that were great about the old process, because it's also kind of an art in making a schedule. It's not just a science, right? So AWS comes in, we go from 10 computers to the power of thousands, right? How does that process look now? We went from a cork board and one schedule maybe in 14 weeks to what does that look like now for you?
What it enables us to do that we were never really able to do was understand the impact of some of our decisions.
Okay.
Right? When we were building the schedule by hand, you make a decision just to get through week 6. We're going to have to put the Patriots-Jets game in week 6 just to finish the week and get to week 7. But we were holding that Patriots-Jets game because we were going to use it on Sunday Night Football in week 12 or Monday Night Football in week 14. Now you got to pull that up from the later weeks, just get it into week 7 so you can keep moving forward. And we're compromising the most important part of our schedule, those national television windows.
Yeah.
So instead of having to make that decision and leave a gap in your Monday night or Sunday night schedule, is there a different way to finish week 7? And it might mean a different decision that you made back in week 3.
Yeah.
And so really understanding if you do this, then you're heading this way, or if you do that, your optimal score is increasing, or if you do that, your total solution space shrinks from this big to this big. Are you sure you want to make that decision, human?
Yeah.
And it's a constant sort of sanity check for ourselves.
Yeah.
Are we doing the right thing? Does gut and feel still match math or science?
Okay. And you said 14 weeks for one schedule last time. I assume there was also a limit on the number of things you could take into account. So nowadays, how long does it take to generate that new schedule if we want to look at that decision from week 3 that impacted week 7? And what other sorts of variables are you able to take into account that maybe you weren't before?
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest change for us as we've really automated the process, partnered more closely with AWS, not just on the hardware side, but also on the inputs and the constraints and the rules that go into us deciding, is this a good decision? Is that a good schedule? Is this schedule today better than the one we were holding in our hands yesterday? We sort of work off of a leader in the clubhouse mentality. If the commissioner came downstairs and banged on the door and said, I need the best one you've got, putting it out tomorrow, we've always got one.
Okay.
So it's always hanging on the wall. It's always the best one we have found so far. And whatever it is,
Yeah.
can we fix it? Because now instead of, okay, it's going to take us 14 weeks to build a new schedule, now we can have new schedules, dozens of them overnight.
Wow.
All of them fixed the fatal flaw in the leader. What did they break in order to accomplish that? Are we better? Are we worse? If we're better, new leader in the clubhouse, hang it on the wall. What's the worst thing about it? Let's try to beat it. If we're not better, leader survives, and it becomes this game of king of the hill. And if that leader survives for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you know we're converging on optimal. You know we're getting pretty close. We can feel better and better about recommending that leader to the commissioner.
So you said, I think 25,000 rules is about the ballpark of what we're able to consider now. I think that might be just a couple hundred more than you guys were able to do with
it's a little bit more. But that's the beauty of the technology partnerships that we've been able to, foster over these years, especially with AWS. We can now factor in things that we never used to be able to consider. Things like the competitive impact of travel or rest or things like that. It would be great if we could predict injuries. It would be great if we could predict trades, free agency moves. We're making this schedule March, April, May while all these things are happening. So it's a lot of kind of daily reaction to the NFL news of the day. But the fortunate part is, even if we are, well down the path, we can kind of start over, change one of those 25,000 rules and run it again. And by tomorrow morning, have a couple of dozen schedules, all of which have now incorporated that new rule, that new constraint, that new must-have that we didn't even think about yesterday.
Yeah. A question that I've always wanted to ask, I think a lot of our fans watching now will have wanted to ask at some point. We're here for the Eagles-Cowboys kickoff game, big primetime game. How do you all decide which games to put into these primetime slots? How do you decide which team the Super Bowl champion faces to start the season?
Yeah, this is a perfect example, actually, because as you think about the Eagles' schedule this year, once they won the Super Bowl, we knew they were going to be hosting tomorrow, September 4th, Thursday opener. We've got, when the schedule comes out in May, we've got 4 months where everybody's maniacally, passionately, obsessively focused on that opener. You, me, and 9 friends could play the Eagles tomorrow night, and I think people would still watch. They're that excited, starved for football. But instead, there were so many good options this year. You think about Denver, you think about Vegas. We could have done Chicago. We could have done anybody in the division. We could have done Detroit. There were so many good choices for Philadelphia. What it really came down to was kind of running the traps. Let's run one with Chicago as kickoff. Let's run one with Denver as kickoff. Let's run one with Dallas as kickoff. Where does that lead us? What does that path look like? How does the rest of the NBC schedule stack up? What does the rest of week 1 look like? Where's everybody traveling? Where are their bye weeks going to fall? How many times is each team in prime time? And what we ended up discovering for ourselves was, normally a game like Philly-Dallas, you're talking about one of the top 3, top 5 games of the year in terms of potential viewership. One way to ensure you're going to get maximum value out of at least one of these Eagles-Cowboys games is to play it in week 1. And the Eagles fans are going to be really excited to hang that banner with the Cowboys in the building.
Absolutely.
And there's going to be, all eyes on us. I think they would have watched even if it was you, me, and 9 friends. I think more people are probably going to watch because it's Dallas coming in tomorrow.
Probably a few more. Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to explain all this to us today. I say let's finish these Philly cheesesteaks, and then I'm going to go see, who else I can meet here while I'm here tailgating.
Absolute pleasure, man. Good.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Take care.
All right, let's go back to the desk.
Life. All right, guys, we are back from Philly with our good friend Dash Flynn here from the AWS side of things. First off, I saw some of you guys in the comments point out a very obvious problem with that segment, which is that I was not able to eat the cheesesteak as we were filming. And yes, that took more self-restraint than I've ever had in my entire life. But apparently it interferes with mics. I don't know. So yeah,
But
that was
did
a
you
little
eat
bit of
it? Did you eventually eat it?
Oh, as soon as filming wrapped, Mike and I were both like, we're digging into these immediately. They gave them to us hot too, which just added to the intenseness of not being able to eat it. But rambling long enough about cheesesteak, Dash, welcome to the show. Can you give a quick introduction to our audience about what you do for AWS in this NFL schedule making process?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. Thanks. Dashel Flynn or Dash. I'm a principal consultant in our sports practice within our professional service team, which really means I work with our sports customers to turn their business objectives into tactical use cases, such as improving how they optimize the schedule, into tactical use cases our technical teams, theirs, and partners can go actually deliver on.
All right.
That's pretty cool. Hey, Dash. So when we were listening to that interview, in my mind, I had this very nostalgic 70s, a bunch of old guys with fedoras on and a corkboard, like trying to figure out the schedule. And then along comes computing and everything's just like fundamentally changed. Can you tell us a little bit about like when did AWS get involved in that process from corkboard to like high performance computing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the NFL had already migrated to a computer-based system when we started to get involved. Though I have had the pleasure of going into the windowless room. The corkboard is still there. You can see the
Wait, it
tags.
was windowless and it was a corkboard.
Oh yes,
Jeez.
absolutely. But yeah, it was great to see that and sort of have the nostalgia of how it used to be done. But we really came involved when we started sort of what we call our 2.0 version of our AWS NFL partnership. And really the schedule optimization was one of the core anchors there. And a lot of the work we did was help optimize how they were building those schedules. So as you heard Mike say, he was excited when they got to 10 computers running. The two things we really initially started with were how do they scale that capability, and then how do they cost optimize. So we work with them around what we call high performance computing, where we optimize which types of nodes, which types of instances or computers they're using, and took them from 10 to 100 to 4,000. So now they're standing up 4,000 nodes each night, able to run 4,000 different versions of the schedule. If they hit a point where the scoring system kicks the schedule off, it restarts on that seed and they're off and running. So it really helped them initially scale sort of how many schedules they could build, how many full schedules they could get. And then the other thing is we work with them on spot instances and pricing, and took $2 million out of the cost for the NFL in terms of generating the schedule. So really we're able to significantly reduce how much it costs them to build that optimal schedule each year.
That's really cool. And something else that I thought was interesting that Mike said is it's a mix of art and science, right? Because it's both like we put, the stuff into the algorithm, but we also need to be able to see like what's the best game, right? We want to make it the best experience for fans. So in building this solution for the NFL, what sort of variables do we want to take into account in making that schedule? And what does he exactly mean? Where's the line between art and science?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sort of two components to it. There's what we call hard rules or 999 rules that are fundamental. If you break this, kill it, that schedule won't work, right? You can't, if SoFi is being used by Taylor Swift on a certain Sunday, you cannot put a Rams game or a Chargers game there, right? There are certain rules that are foundational that can't be broken, and those are sort of the hard rules that we have. And then there are soft rules, things like, certain teams like to have a bigger buffer when they come back from an international game, or other sort of travel-based penalties, that sort of thing. And those are rules. There are also rules that, when we see a schedule, we're seeing Dallas versus Cleveland on a Thursday come up over and over again. Well, we really don't like that. Let's put in a rule that says don't have that game show up in that slot. Those kinds of things. And then you come back and they're like, oh, well, a soft rule you can start to break if you need to, right? And you're starting to see built schedules, and that's where the art comes in. As Mike said, that leader in the clubhouse, the art is how do you find that next one that goes on, and what's that rule set that gets you there.
Gotcha.
That's cool. Now, so I imagine this is sort of like an iterative process, right? We start with this initial system to get them at least out of 10 computers. They were already using computers, and then we've iterated on that to make it better and better. Can you just talk a little bit about the evolution of those iterations and what AWS has done over time to go from 10 computers to, what'd you say, 4,000 nodes and high performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of that was sort of step one, right? Was work we did with them right when we got in and started working with them regularly. Was that instance types, that scalability, et cetera. A lot of now what we're working with them around is how do we start to enhance that process, right? So one of the things that traditionally has been a difficult point is forecasting ratings around Sunday afternoon games. So on a Sunday night, there's only one game showing. Everybody in the country nationally can see that one game. On a Sunday afternoon, CBS might have 6 games to pick from, and they're putting different games in different markets. So what you see in Seattle will be different than the game you see in New York versus Atlanta versus Houston. And so we actually worked with them recently around a POC to lay out a recommendation engine that would recommend the ideal matchup for a fully built schedule, the ideal matchup within each of those 52 measured markets, to then be able to forecast what the ratings are and get a Sunday afternoon rating. That's one iteration we've made in terms of enhancing how they're building those schedules. The next one that we're starting to work on, that we have worked on now, is how do they actually bring ratings directly into the optimization engine. Traditionally, it's been sort of a negative scoring-based system where there's these rules with negative scores. Now we've been built in the ability to take a forecasted ratings and build that into the optimization. And so the new optimization models are directly optimizing for ratings, which is ultimately how they measure the quality of the schedule, right? What is the ratings? How many fans actually come and view these games is the end measure they want to maximize ultimately. So we started to build that ratings capacity straight into the optimizer, as opposed to having to build 20,000 rules that 10 of them are really about tweaking different games they want to take out for ratings purposes, as opposed to being able to do that directly. So that's a big part of it. And then the last iteration right now is around the GUI and how they do that, right? It's been a manual rules process. We've built a new GUI that has both an upstream where they're ingesting and creating those rules, and then a downstream where all of the evaluation metrics are in one place. So they can click on a schedule, click on a particular team, and see what the rest advantage is that against their opponents all season. Or they can click on a broadcaster and see what does Prime Video's Thursday night lineup look like, and are they balancing? Because they're often balancing, making sure networks are each getting equivalent ratings ultimately, et cetera.
Gotcha. I love hearing about this. I could talk about it all day. I find it fascinating because it's like the ultimate puzzle. Like, it's building week by week. Is this actually going to be the best game? You have to predict a bunch of stuff. I know we're getting the tag from our producers right now that we got to start moving on because we're running out of time for this segment. But I want to end. You mentioned the fans. What has the reception been like? What does it mean for fans? And what's been the results so far from this project over the last couple of years?
Yeah, we're seeing the average ratings continually go up, right? We think you're at a peak, and the next season you get it just increases viewership and increases of viewership. And you look at that Commanders Packers game from last night. What's the optimal place to put that to maximize the amount of fans who can see it and sort of kick off the season if it's Prime's first game, that sort of thing. So really, what we're seeing is just a continual love of football and how we're helping serve those fans as much as possible.
I love it, Mike. Dash, thank you so much for coming on and kind of expanding on what Mike told us. As I said, love to read about this, hear about this. I think we're going to drop a link in the chat where you guys can read a blog expanding on everything that Dash was just talking about. I encourage you to read it. Dash, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.